My name is Father Buhl. I'm a retired priest from the Diocese of Duluth. I live over in Evelyn right now, so it's good to be here this morning to celebrate this Eucharist with you. And this weekend, something I always look forward to is on this weekend. I'm referring to a golf tournament over in England. It's the it's the Open they call it. And I always look forward to watching this on TV. It's on right now. I look forward to when I get through with Mass over in Chisholm. Maybe I'll get to see the end of it. And the reason I like to watch this tournament, I think it's because it's so unpredictable. The wind, the weather and the wind comes along, and even people who are well ahead can find themselves coming back to the pack really fast. So it's a good tournament to watch. I always look forward to seeing it. And that leads me then to talk a little bit about Scotland. Do you know what the national emblem of Scotland is? It is the lowly thistle. And how did it become this? Well, there's a good story about that. Many years ago, the Vikings and the Danes, the army of Danes invaded Scotland, and they crept over the border at night and made their advance quietly. And soon they came upon a camp of sleeping Scots. In order to make their advance more quietly, the Danes removed their boots and walked barefooted into the camp. And all of a sudden, one of the Danish soldiers brought his bare foot down squarely in a prickly thistle and shouted out in pain. Of course, the Scots heard this and wakened from their sleep and routed the Danes. And from this time onward, the thistle, which was considered a nuisance, became the national emblem of Scotland. It's kind of a nice story because it tells us that even lowly things are part of God's creation and are to be respected. It kind of reminded me of the gospel today about the farmer who went out and sowed good seeds in his field. And then an enemy came overnight and sowed bad seeds, or weeds. He sowed weeds. Isn't that a very malicious neighbor to have? Somebody who does something like that. Well, anyway, he did it. And so the farmer noticed then, he came out, he noticed the weeds among his wheat. And someone suggested to him, shouldn't we go out now and pull up the weeds now? And the farmer said, no, because if we pull up the weeds now, we'll also pull up the wheat. And so we will have nothing eventually. And so he recommended patience. Be patient, he says, until harvest time. And then when the harvest time comes, we can pull both of them up, and then we can separate the good from the bad. Well, what's the message of this parable? What is it saying to us? What is Jesus trying to tell us in this parable? Well, I think he's trying to tell us to be patient. That God is patient with us. And he needs to be patient with us. Because in all of our lives, there are weeds there, I think. There are things that we're not proud of. But God is saying to us, the weeds can turn into wheat eventually. And so God is patient with us. I suppose we all have a tendency to divide people into two groups. The people who are good, or the people who are we think are good, or the people who are evil. And perhaps that would be a wrong judgment to make, because we do not really know who the good people are and who the bad people are, because we are each one of us, even though how good we are, there's some form of how should we put it, some form of evil, or something that we don't want. There are weeds there in our lives, and we need to work on the weeds to make them, to root them out of our lives if we can. Through God's grace and patience, that can happen. And, we would appreciate then the patience of God with us. You know, God, we're not a finished product, but that's okay, as long as we're striving with God's grace to grow in His image and likeness. There's hope for us all, I'm trying to say, even no matter how much evil there is in our lives, how much weeds there are there, that God can turn these things into wheat eventually. I think that's where the church would come into. We come to church on Sunday or on the weekends, and we are to be aware of who we are. We are a church of saints and sinners. And so, rather than seeing the church as an exclusive club for holy people, the church should be more of a hospital for sinners. And in saying that, I'm quoting a good source. I think it is our present Pope, Pope Francis, who preaches that idea that we are a hospital for sinners. And so we are very much aware of that, because one of the first prayers we say if we come to church on Sunday morning would be that prayer: I confess to Almighty God and to you, my brothers and sisters. How does the rest of it go? That I have sinned. Somewhere it says that, doesn't it? Yes, it does. And so we are aware of that. And we're not perfect people. But that does not disqualify us, because we know through God's mercy and grace we become saints. And someone has remarked, some of the greatest saints were one time some of the greatest sinners. And so we need to be aware of that. Through God's grace and strength, we become saints. And I like the quote. It says, the Christian church is a society of sinners. It is the only society in the world in which membership is based on the single qualification that a candidate is I must confess that I like the script, there will always be imperfection and sin. So someone has said, the Christian society is a society of sinners. It's the only society in the world in which the membership is based on the single qualification that a candidate is unworthy of membership. Kind of like that. And so we always need to then to look for the forgiveness of God, for the strength that comes from that. So we looked at that today, and we remember that parable about Jesus, what Jesus told us. So I'd like to quote from a Russian author. He uses these words. He says, the line separating good from evil passes through every human heart, and even in the best of hearts there remains an uprooted small corner of evil. Yes, there does. Yes, God is patient with us. He gives us plenty of opportunities. So today, let us acknowledge God's grace and mercy, and above all, let us rejoice in His love for us and the mercy He extends to us all.